movies. Like I said, it started in 2004.
Right.
So not only is it the show, it's all the Oceans. I think it was Oceans 12. He was sick for that. Guess Who? He got hospitalized during the filming of Guess Who. What else? Like by the time he got to the last two movies he filmed was Madagascar 3 and no, Old Dogs was, I'm sorry, I was wrong. Old Dogs is the one with Robin Williams. It was Wild Hogs? That was the one with John Travolta and Martin Lawrence. Yeah, Old Dogs. So those two, when he filmed those, he was old. Like he was, about as okay as he probably was going to be at that point in his life. But yeah, all of this, those last 4 years of his life, all of that was happening then.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So let's talk about I guess the last couple years.
Okay.
And and what was that like? Did you accompany your father, or I guess was it a team effort between you and your mom, with I guess taking him to and from his doctor's appointments and stuff? Like how did that go about?
Well, he had a driver then, so when he had doctor's appointments, we didn't necessarily go. But when he was hospitalized, we were there. Like the first time when his first bout of pneumonia in 2004, we got a call because he was in California filming the show. So we got the call here at home that he was hospitalized, and we were ready to rush out. And he was like, "Nope, don't come. I'm fine." And we're like, "Sir, we just got a call in the middle of the night that you were rushed to the hospital for pneumonia. No, you're not fine." He was like, "Yes, I am. Don't come." Like, and he wouldn't let us come. So we were like, "You sure you okay?" "I'm fine." His favorite line, "Don't nothing bother me. I bother it." So the very first time he was hospitalized, we just had to take his word that he said he was okay. Once it happened the second time, we were like, "Now we're not listening to you." So we were there, and every time after that, we were there. And it like we were pushing him, stop trying to do. I remember when he wanted to try methotrexate, because my mom, was a nurse for years. So, Rhonda put on her nurse hat and she was like, "I'm sorry, do you know what methotrexate is?" She was like, one of the side effects is death. Like, I'm not comfortable with this. No. Like, we were like, "No, please stop." And he kept trying all these different drugs, and we were like, "Would you please stop? Please go back to prednisone." And he was so stubborn. He was adamant, like, no. And I remember his doctor, Dr. Mike's, we were like, "Would you please talk to him?" And after, I think, Imuron, that was like the fourth one. After that, she was like, "Okay, listen, you got to listen to your family too." Like, no. So yeah, we were always like right there with him, involved in everything, even up till like when he ultimately, his last time getting hospitalized, he once again quit prednisone because he hated prednisone. So he went to Humira. And Humira was only supposed to be a monthly injection. But he decided, no, we're gonna treat this more aggressively. So he was getting it every week, which again, it's an immune suppressor. You already are at a weakened capacity, and it just made him sick. And he was sick for like a week. And we kept saying, "You sure you don't want to go to the doctor?" And he kept saying, "No, I'm fine. I've got an appointment next week. I'll just go next week." And so when he went the next week to the hospital, that's when he found out he had pneumonia yet again. And his doctor was like, "Okay, we don't have any beds right now, so just sit tight till we get a bed." And him being stubborn said, "That's all right. I'm gonna go run some errands." Because at that point, I think that was like his fourth time having pneumonia. So he was like, "I've done this before. I'm fine." And ultimately, he wasn't. And he wound up having to get rushed back to the hospital because by the time he got there, his body was in septic shock. And
Wow.
he was able to sign, he was able to sign himself in and admit himself. But after that, he was on a ventilator. And he stayed on the ventilator for the last 3 weeks of his life.
And when he did pass, what was going through your mind?
Oh gosh. It was surreal. I don't even know. I still, 15 years later, I still don't really know how to put it into words. It was one of those things where I don't want to say it was a complete shock, because as the weeks went on, week 3, you start looking at it, okay, I'm coming to this hospital every day, to ICU, and you realize not that many people are able to get out of this alive. Most people who are here in ICU, they're not coming out alive. But I still had this hope. Like week 1 was like, okay, he's gonna get better. Like he's gonna be fine. He's gonna be fine. Week 2 was kind of touch and go. Week 2 was when it was like, okay, we need to confront the possibility that it might not happen. Week 3 was kind of just numbness. It was just like, I don't know what's about to happen. And I remember that night, like once we went in to see him, I pretty much knew, like he wasn't, it just, he wasn't there. I knew it. Like at that point, the doctor had already called me and said that he had coded and he had been gone for like 3 minutes, but they brought him back. And when they went in, when they let us see him, I knew. And I remember I just went to him and I was like, please don't leave me. Like, I'm not ready to live without you, please. And I remember they were like, okay, well, we're going to clean him up and we'll give you a room to sit in. We'll clean him up and then we'll let you back in. And my mom and I, we really didn't say anything because I think both of us were, in that same state of like, oh gosh. But I remember thinking to myself, I can't fall asleep. Because at this point, it's now like 1 o'clock in the morning. And I remember thinking, I was like, I'm not, like, if I fall asleep, that's going to be it. He won't be here when I wake up. And I remember trying to fight sleep, and sleep ultimately won. And then I woke up because the doctor came in the room and my mom looked and she said, he's gone, isn't he? And the doctor just, she looked and nodded, and a sound came out of me that I didn't even know that I could make. And that it just, complete and utter devastation. And I just, I don't know any other words. That's pretty much was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you remember, and take some time, please. If you need a tissue or anything. Okay.
I'm okay. Like, what's funny? Well, not funny. Haha. I took my daughter to see Blue Beetle last night. And I don't want to give any spoilers to anybody who wants to see it, but there's a scene that was so reminiscent of that to me. I just started bawling full on bawling. And my daughter was like, oh my God, Mom, are you okay? And I was like, I'm okay. And I told her, I said, it's been 15 years. And every time you think you're okay, something will happen that shows you sure about that? You sure you're okay? You sure? And that was the moment. Like I can talk about, I feel that lump, in my chest. Like, I feel it, but I can talk about it. I'm okay.
All right.
Yeah.
Because even whether it's been a couple of days or whether it's like day 1 and you're like, okay, versus year 15 as you're experiencing with the anniversary. Wow, 15 years. Everyone grieves differently.
Yeah.
Everyone grieves differently, and it's okay to grieve.
Please say that again, please. It is so
it's okay to grieve.
Yes, thank you. Gosh, I wish we knew that. Like, no one told me that. No one told me that when he died, and it was it was this pressure and this rush that I was putting on myself to go back to normal. And the crazy thing about that is, like, normal's gone. Normal as I knew it was gone, never coming back. And I could not reconcile that. I was just like, no, I got to get to normal. And it wasn't until my therapist asked me, she said, he was your dad for 30 years. So why do you think that you should be over it in like a year? Why would you be? And when she asked that, that's what made me go, oh, so I've been doing this wrong this whole time, huh? Like, I've been doing this wrong. Oh, okay. Okay. But yeah, it's a friend of mine. Her dad died when we were in junior high. And for the life of me, my heart always goes out to when you lose your parent as a kid. I was 30 and I was like, I'm sorry, what am I supposed to do now? So I can't imagine as a kid. But she told me, she said, I can't tell you that it gets easier, but I will tell you that it gets more manageable. And I think that was like the best thing to this day that anyone has ever said to me, because it's like when it first happens, it's such a shock to your system.
Yeah.
You're just like, what? What is this? No, what? No, take it back. I don't want this. Like, go. Yeah. And that, like, the first year, especially, you're still, because again, you're still trying to be in a space of normalcy, which you're comparing it to what was before. And every time you encounter this new thing, this new first, Mother's Day or Father's Day, first birthday, first holiday, get my first big promotion, like whatever the first is, it brings it all up all over again. And as the time goes on, it's not like you miss them any less. It's not like you ever get to a point where you're like, I'm so good that my daddy did. I'm so good with that. Like, you never get to that point. It just becomes so familiar now that you're like, okay, I know, like, okay, well, it's been this many years living without, so this is my normal now. But it's okay. You're never like, yeah, this is awesome. Like, I don't like it any more today than I liked it all those years ago. And I always say, like, I feel a bit of a kinship with my dad, with him watching me grow up, because there would be these times where you could see he would get a little melancholy, and he would say to me how much I remind him of his mother, how much I look like his mother, which once I saw the picture, I was like, oh, okay, I do. Yes, I get it. Or he would say stuff like, I wish my mom could see me now. Like, like, I'm, doing this, and I wish my mom could see me. And that's how I feel now with my daughter. Every time she does something that reminds me of him, I'm like, oh my God, you act just like, you sound like your grandfather right now. Oh my gosh. I'm looking at her, and sometimes it does tug in my heart, because I'm like, you have no idea how much that man loved you. Like, and I hate that for her, because he adored her. And I know they would be thick as thieves right now. So those are the things that make it like, gosh, like, she started driving, this year, and she's a good driver though. She's really good.
That's good.
Yeah. Like, when we first got on the road, I was gripping the arm up here. I was like, still trying to keep my stoic face. Like, you're doing so good. You're doing so good, girl. But she really is. She's a really good driver. And I just like watching her, and I was just like, my God, do you know how happy he would be to see her drive? I could hear him right now. Granddaughter, you driving? Well, you gonna be my driver? Like, I could hear him, and that's the thing that is most difficult for me, that she doesn't get to see and know him the way I wish she did.
And when did your daughter, her name is Jasmine, correct?
Correct.
Jasmine. Yep. When did she come to know her grandfather, Bernie Mac? Like, was it through your stories? Maybe as she got older, you would tell her, like, this is your grandpa. Like, how did she come to know him?
So like I said, my dad's mom died when she was 16, and nobody really talked about her to me. Like, I had an uncle who would always say, gosh, she looks just like Mary. Like, he would say it all the time, and everybody was like, oh yeah. But it didn't really mean anything to me, because I'd never seen her. Nobody, like, even my dad, he talked about her, but not a lot. And so I didn't see a picture of my grandmother until I was like 16. And that when I saw the picture and saw how much I looked like her, that's when it hit me like, oh, wow. Okay. So I knew I didn't want to do that to Jasmine. I was like, I don't want her to not know her grandfather. So I always like, because she was only one, he died in August, and October she turned 2. So she used to talk about, like, she would look for him a lot. She was like, because she called him Dada. So she was like, where's Dada? Like, where, like, she was looking for him and trying to, and then it got to a point where after a while she would claim she saw him. Like, she'd be like, Dada's right. And she's like, yeah, Dada, he's right there. Like, you know, pointing up, and I'm looking at her like, oh my gosh. Okay, you can see him? Oh, okay. So I wanted to keep that connection alive for her. So I would talk about him all the time. I would tell her stories, you know, and then I want to say when she was like 3, I started showing her the sitcom, the Bernie Mac show. And that's where she really got her connection. And she is a lot like my dad, where she can watch, if she loves something, she's going to watch it on repeat. So we used to watch, like, it got to a point where I was like, I'm so mad I introduced her to this show, because gee, girl, if we watch this one more time, oh boy. So that's when, so she got to a point, I think around 4, she was like, why do they keep calling Pop Bernie Mac when his name was Bernard McCullough? And that's when I explained to her, okay, well, your Pop was famous. His name is Bernard McCullough, but he shortened it to Bernie Mac. And I remember the very first time I told her that, she said, oh, well, I'm going to be like Pop. I'm going to be famous. But instead of calling me Jasmine, I want everybody to call me the Fizzle. So that's going to be my stage. Like you said, that's his stage name. That's going to be my stage name.
All right, we get to know the backstory to the Fizzle.
Yeah, so the Fizzle, like, so her nickname, I used to call her Jazzy Fizzle, and I did that because her name's Jasmine. You know, every girl named Jasmine. What does everybody call her? Jazzy, Jazz. I was like, I'm not doing that. So I used to call her. There's a group called the Jazzy Fat Nasties that I love. I used to call her that, but I was like, that's too long. I can't call her that. And then I remember, I don't know what I was listening to, but the producer, Jazzy Faye, you know, he starts every song with, this is a Jazzy Fizzle production. So I started calling her Jazzy Fizzle. And then sometimes I would shorten it to J Fizzle or just Fizzle. And like I said, when she was 4, that's when she said, well, that's going to be, the Fizzle is going to be my stage name. And that's how we started just shortening it to the Fizzle.
Well, that's a cool name.
Yeah.
That's a cool name. I wanted to kind of go back to talking a little bit about your childhood and probably more so when you would go to school. Were you in private school?
No. No. Well, look, so we were poor. They couldn't afford it. I was a public school kid. Yeah.
Well, even so, by the time your father had his big break, how old were you at that time?
So, okay, that depends on what you're calling his big break. So, but when he did Def Jam, the first time he did Def Jam, I was in the 7th grade. The second year, I was in the 8th grade, but Def Jam didn't pay. So even though career-wise, that was a big break, you know, in terms of his career, it didn't bring any money. So we were still living in a 1-bedroom apartment on 101st and King Drive on the south side of Chicago. And then after it was with the Def Jam tour and his tour, that's when he started making money. And my sophomore year in high school, that's when we moved down by Navy Pier. And that's when it was like, oh, we've got money now. Oh, we don't have to. And I remember, like, we moved a week before school started. And my mom, like, after we moved, my mom was like, okay, well, we need to go shopping for you for school. And I remember, like, we weren't going to, like, the, you know, the cheaper chain stores like, we went to the mall where she was like, here. And I'm like, hold on, you know what store we're in, right? Like, and I'm still thinking okay, we're going to put it down. We'll get it out probably, you know, in October. And the lady gave the price and my mom paid for it and was like, here, get your bag. And I was like, we're taking these home today? And she was like, yeah. And I'm like, no. Time out. I mean, these like, we don't have to take them somewhere else where, like, for them to hold them, like they're coming home right now with us. Yeah. And she was like, yes, like, don't worry, it's okay, like, we've got money. And I was like, oh, okay, all right. Now the weirdest part about that is I went to my high school. I went to Morgan Park High School. And I went there. They had a junior high program. So that's where I was 7th grade and 8th grade. So I just transitioned over from high school. Once we moved down by Navy Pier, because that's, you know, downtown Chicago, right? Because we moved around so much, my parents didn't want to transfer me to another school. They wanted to keep me. And they were like, listen, if we've moved around so much, we'd like to keep something stable for you. So they were like, well, we'll try to hire a private bus company to bus you from, you know, downtown to south side of the city. So there was no private bus company. So he had to get his driver at the time, his limo driver. So I got sent to school every day back and forth in a limousine. And I hated every bit of it. And I know, like, when I tell this story to people, I'm like, I know that sounds like such a bratty thing. Like, how dare you be upset that you got to school in a limo? But I always tell people, like, I went to school. One, I did not go to school, you know, around a bunch of Hollywood kids. I wasn't in LA with a bunch of Hollywood kids. I was on the south side of Chicago with the same people that I'd grown up with all this time. And then I grew up before my super sweet 16. It wasn't cool to be, you know, you at that age, you want to be like everybody else. I didn't want to stick out. So that was like torture to me. I used, like, it got to the point where I was like, can you go down the street and I'll just get out and walk? Like, and of course, you know, people, oh my God, she thinks she all that because she drive a limo to school. I'm like, oh, I just want to be like everybody else. No. So yeah.
Wow. Yeah. And I think I want to say that also kind of played out a little bit in some of the episodes and scenes of the show, like with them pulling up in the limos.
Oh, yep. When they went back and Vanessa tried to, yeah, it's a culture shock because you still see yourself as the same person, but everybody else around you is like, nah, you've changed. Things are different now. And you're like, no. Well, I mean, only, okay, sure. Okay. Yeah. Okay. I'm coming to school in a limousine. Okay. Yeah. Like, I'm dressing in better clothes, but okay. Yeah. But above that, like, it's still the same. And everybody's like, no, it ain't. Yeah.
So when I guess you would have some of the students like saying, oh, she thinks she's all that, and, you know, just because she got some new clothes and she, you know, riding in a limo. Were you bullied at that point in high school?
In high school, it wasn't so much, like, I got bullied mostly from like kindergarten to 6th grade.
Okay.
Once I left my grammar school and went to Morgan Park for 7th grade, that's when I was like, okay, listen, I'm not going, like, this ain't, I just can't, I can't go to school all day getting bullied. Like, no. So that's when I started kind of standing up for myself a little more and taking, so I didn't get bullied so much. It was more, you know, like that mean girl, mean people energy. You're walking down the hallway and you hear people whispering about you and talking about you. I can't stand her. And all. And then it got to a point where like, I had this reputation that somebody just made up, like, oh, she's a terrible human being. And so people would just be talking, oh, you know, Brandy Mac daughter, I can't stand her. She's so mean. She's so that. But to show you how they didn't even know what they were talking about, they would come talk about me to me. Like, me and my friends would be, you know, together, and people would walk up to us, y'all know Brandy Mac daughter go here? And we all would be looking at each other like, yeah. Oh, do y'all like her? Because I can't stand her. She thinks she all that and she ain't nothing. And, you know, my friends, no, really? What's she do? And I'm looking at them like, if y'all don't stop, come on now, stop.
Oh my goodness.
But yeah, it was weird. And I really was like, I was like a care bear. I just wanted to love everybody and have everybody love me. So that really hurt my feelings because I was just like, and I felt it was so undeserved. I'm like, I haven't even done anything to you. Like, what are you talking about? Like, I have a good friend to this day, and I remember we met in girls' chorus. We were both sopranos, and like halfway through the school year, I remember she looked at me and she said, "JeNiece, I owe you an apology." And I'm looking at her like, why you owe me an apology? And she goes, when I got to class and I saw that I was sitting next to you, I was so mad because so many people had talked about you to me that I hated you and I didn't even know you. And she was like, it was so bad that when your name came up, I would tell people, oh, I can't stand her. And,
Wow.
and she's like, and I would just talk about you. She said, and then I get in this class with you. And she was like, you are so nice. You're one of the nicest people I ever met. I'm so sorry. I feel so bad. And I was like, oh. Well, I mean, I appreciated her telling me, but that's how that whole thing, it spiraled and snowballed. And I was just like, what happened? And I even lost some friends. I had people that I thought were my friends that I found out later that they were like, nope, I don't like her. She stuck up and conceded now that she thinks, that her dad's famous. And I'm like, but I didn't do anything, but I'm still me. But
right. Yeah. Wow. And so following your dad's passing, you assumed a very high position in his foundation. Were you the vice president?
Yes.
And so your mom was president?
Correct. Mm-hmm.
So what was that like? I can only just think about how much of a responsibility you felt, obligated to be like, oh, I gotta step in. I gotta make sure I gotta make sure it goes smoothly. So what was that like?
Were you me? Because were you in my head? Because that's exactly I remember telling myself it's my responsibility. I'm his only child. I have to keep his legacy going. He started this foundation, in the hopes of, bringing some real change to sarcoidosis awareness. And I've got to carry the torch. I've got to do it. And it was just, I would love to say that I enjoyed it, but I didn't, because I put so much pressure on myself.
Yeah.
To fulfill this thing that really no one had told me to. And I remember initially my mom was like, do you want to work with the foundation? And I was like, absolutely not. No. Like, I was like, I am in bereavements. Don't nobody look for me to do nothing, because I'm not doing nothing. And then, and then as time passed, I was like, nope, I've got to take up this charge. I have to. And I started doing it. And like I said, I really didn't enjoy it. I think it just kind of exacerbated my grief, especially because a big part of dealing with this foundation was having to go around, the country and talk about his experience with sarcoidosis and his death and all. And it was just reliving and retelling it over and over again. This immense pressure that only I was putting on myself. No one else was putting it on me. It was all me. And I remember ultimately I was like, I can't carry on. Like, I can't do this. I gotta step away. And I remember feeling so sad. Like, I cried like that whole night when I was like, I gotta step down, because I felt like I was letting him down. And I remember going to bed. I was like, I'm so sorry, Dad, I let you down, because I just can't do, I can't do it. And ultimately, thankfully I'm okay with the decision now. That was probably the best thing for me to do. But yeah, I really did feel like it was all on my shoulders. Like, if I didn't do it, who would? Because with my mom, I was like, yes, you're his wife, and you can do it. But I felt like if my mom said, I don't want to do this, I want to live my own life, I felt like people would have been more understanding versus me saying, I can't do this. I felt like people would have been like, but you his only baby. How could you? So, yeah.
And what is the foundation like today?
Oh, the
What's
foundation.
going on?
It's in great hands. My mom is still running it, and she brought her sister on board, so they're running the foundation. So it's in great hands. I know me, so I try to stay as hands. I'm like that. I walked away for a reason, so I stay hands off, because otherwise I know I'll be like, well, let me mosey, let me look what's over there and see just
let me see what's going
yeah,
on.
let me see. Oh, what y'all do? Okay. So I'm like, no, let me stay back. So yeah, they are still working with different clinics. My mom still travels speaking about sarcoidosis. They're building partnerships and still just trying to raise awareness, because that's one of the frustrating things to me about sarcoidosis. My dad was diagnosed, like I said, I was 6 when my dad was diagnosed. And ultimately today, when you talk to sarcoidosis patients, I still have people who will tell me, I just got diagnosed last year. And that's what you said your dad went through. I went through that. And that's a shame to me. Like, we still don't have a better means of diagnosing it. We still don't have a better means of treating it. So not only do I have to deal with the debilitating effects of the disease, but now I've got to be like experimented upon, because who knows, prednisone, or any other steroid may be a mixed bag, or are you going to give me an immune suppressor, devastate me more than the disease itself? So that's very frustrated about. And I wish that there were more answers and better solutions for people.
Most definitely. And I just I continue to think about the foundation and just the mission that that you and your family are on, to bring awareness to the disease, in honor of your father. So continue the good work, because it's very important. It's very important.
It is,
Yeah. It is. Yes, I wanted to talk a little bit about what you're doing now. Yes, what are you doing now? You're a public speaker, so you still go around to different events, and people are requesting your presence for different things. So still doing that and talking. So what is Je'Niece McCullough doing now?
Like you said, I'm still public speaking. I talk about whereas in the past I was just talking about, my dad and sarcoidosis. I talk about more now. I'm much more vocal about my own life and my journey through, dealing with my depression and grief. So those are 2 things that I speak about, and like just women's empowerment, and things like that. And I'm writing has always been my first love. So that is something that I am still doing. And it's so crazy. Like, I remember when my dad died and I was like, I'm going to write a book. I'm going to write a book. And it's been, who would have, if you had told me 15 years ago, you still going to be writing this book 15 years later, I'd have been like, am I? No, say it ain't so. So I am still writing my book. It's evolved, and it's evolved along with me. And I can now, being on this side of my grief, I understand why it wasn't as simple for me to write all those years ago. So yeah, I do. I write on Medium. So if anybody, if you want to check out things that I, have to say, medium.com at Bernie's daughter, I write about a lot of stuff. Things I've learned, from living life with my dad, things I've learned through being a mom, like I said, my journey through, depression and dealing with anxiety as well. And sometimes just random musings on my mind. So I'm, doing that. And of course, most important thing, raising my kid, like,
Yes.
above all else, that's the most important thing, And I tell people, I'm like, well, I'm not my dad. I don't have a Rhonda at home. So it's all on me. So she is top priority. But we're on the home stretch. Well, she'll be 17 this month. I mean, in this year in October. So
wow,
almost there. Yeah.
awesome. And what have you learned after the birth of your daughter? Just what has her birth and raising her, what has that taught you?
Oh my gosh. It's taught me a lot. But you know what's so interesting? One of the major things that it's taught me is how to love myself. You know, we tend to give our kids and try to do for our kids everything that we felt like we were missing. And there was a point, I remember, like, I would look at her and I would think, you know, I'm going to be like this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. And I remember just looking like, I don't think that's her issue though. I don't think she need, like, I keep saying I'm going to do that for her, but I don't really think that's her issue. And I remember sitting asking her, like, well, how do you feel about this? And she was just like, I don't really care. Like, I don't and I realized, I said, okay, so I've got to stop parenting her like she's me. She's not me. And that was, I thought I was doing a good job of, and I may be harder on myself than I need to be, but I had a tendency, because she's a lot like me, I see a lot of myself in her. I sometimes would make the mistake of feeling like I knew her better than I maybe did, because I was like, oh, she's like me. So, you know, I got this thing done. So I really learned how to take a step back and give her space to parent her as if she's me. Even though we may be similar, we're not the same person. So I check in a lot more with her, like, hey, what do you need in this? Like, what do you need? And one thing that I appreciate about my dad that I try to mimic is, my dad was an honest parent. He was very candid in his conversations. So I do that with her. I'm like, okay, because if I'm going to prepare you for the world, I can't hide, you know, behind things, and we've got to know how to have uncomfortable conversations. So doing those things with her just kind of helped me learn how to do those things with myself as well. Yeah.
And how do you continue to honor your father's life and legacy?
Oh,
How
wow.
do you continue to do that?
I do. You know what? It's so interesting. If you had asked me this some years ago, I'd try to tell you all these things that I do. You know, I try to, you know, make sure people remember him, and I try to talk about him. And now I realize I don't have to do any of those things. One, I honor him just by existing. I am my dad's legacy. And to me, I do my best to remember him without, you know, because when people die, when we lose our loved ones, we tend to almost deify them, you know, and try to make them out to be more than what they are. So I try my best to not do that with him. I try to, like, and you see, if you follow me on, you know, social media, hear me talking about my dad, I give you, you know, the ugly side too. Like, this is where because that's who he was. But I laugh. I keep his spirit of laughter alive, because he believed that laughter was healing. So I always make sure that we are laughing. Most especially though, it's like I said with Jasmine, I think I honor him by making sure that she is always aware of who her grandfather is and how much he loved her, because I think he would have said the very same thing that I'm going to say, that the whole world loving him and knowing him wouldn't mean much if his granddaughter didn't. If his family had a crappy relationship with his family, but the whole world of him, he'd be like, that I failed as a human. So I do my best to make sure that she knows her grandfather, not just for his fame, but for him as a man, for who he was. So those are the things that I do.
That's beautiful. And you know, all these different biopics coming out and different movies and stuff. And could you see any of that happening, like a biopic on your father?
I can't say I really want them. I'm not a big fan of biopics. So I feel like It's so difficult to take someone's entire life and condense it into like 2 hours. And I'm not a fan of movies over 2 hours either. I think after a while, it's like you could have trimmed about 15, 20 minutes off of this, you know. And then, you know, with biopics, there's this tendency to fictionalize stuff to make it more salacious. And with my dad's life, you know, my dad's life really wasn't salacious. He was, you know, I tell people, I'm like, he was an ordinary man. Like he used to tell people, I'm an ordinary man with an extraordinary job. So I'm sure it'll happen. I'm sure it probably will. I just hope they do him justice, because I would hate for them to cast the wrong person or like super embellish some facts. And then I'd just be like, no, y'all didn't have to do that. Now, come on. So, yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. Definitely want to make sure that if that you are, you know, you have some input, you know, that you have that executive, you and your mother have that executive producer credit, because because Hollywood, they'll
take your story and run with it. Yeah.
So that's important. And we have a couple of minutes left in our show here. I want to play a game.
Oh, okay.
It's a quick game, what I like to call rapid fire questions. Rapid fire questions. And so we're just gonna go one after the other. Got a couple of questions, about five questions here. And so are you ready?
I think so. Yes. I'm like, okay, perimenopause brain, turn off. Like, come on, let's get at our peak. All right.
Okay, so here we go. Rapid fire questions with Je'Niece McCullough. All right, number 1. What's your favorite hobby?
Reading.
Reading.
Read, yeah. Love to read.
Yes, and I remember I either read it. I don't know if I read this in a comment or you may have mentioned it in like a documentary or something, but where you were talking about how your father, like if you were on punishment or something, your father would take your books away.
He would come in with a box and he would just sweep all my books into the box. Like, okay, that's it. And I'd be like, no, not the books. Take the TV. Take the TV. Like, yeah, like, because he realized like taking the TV and the radio, like I love music too, but I could deal with that as long as I have books. But after a while, he was like, oh, I know how to get you. So yeah, he would take my books.
Wow. Taking the books away.
Yep.
What is the best piece of advice that your father ever gave you?
Oh gosh, I got to narrow it down to one. He would say, learn how to tell yourself the truth. He was like, you can lie to other people, but to lie to yourself is the worst thing you can do. So I have to say that.
And well, what's your favorite color?
Purple.
Purple. All right. And if your life was a story or a movie, what would it be titled?
I'd have to go the Langston Hughes. Life for me ain't been no crystal stair.
That's deep. But that's a very, I think that's a good title, appropriate title. So very nice. And then also you talked about earlier. You did talk a little bit about being an introvert.
Yes,
being an introvert. Yes.
I am. Yeah. You were doing so good. Really?
He's like, look, the time has come. You've been on.
Yes.
Time has come. We wrapping up.
And I tell people, and he won't do anything. If you saw him, he'd immediately just be like, hey, like that's all. It's all bravado. Nothing behind it.
And how can everyone find you on social media?
Oh, that's easy. Bernie's daughter. Like, and it's so funny that I'm going by that, because I used to hate for people to find out that That's who I was, but that's kind of why I did it. I was like, well, the thing that I struggled with the most is the thing that I guess I just need to embrace. So that's Bernie's daughter across the board. Instagram, TikTok, except Medium. That's been Facebook. I'm on there as myself, Je'Niece McCullough. Dude, like really? You did so good, and now you want to wait till the last minute to be embarrassing. Noise. This is who's making the noise.
Oh, there he is.
Who's making the noise? This is who's making the noise. Yeah, see? Go. It won't do anything. I promise you, he won't do anything.
Well, I must say, it has been a joy to just hear you talk about all the different stories and about the life and legacy of your father and his rise to fame and talking about bringing awareness to sarcoidosis, all of those things. Is there anything else you wanted to talk about or that any questions I didn't ask you already?
No, I think we covered a lot. Yeah.
Yes. So for all of those out there, if when you all will be watching this on YouTube, please make sure to follow Je'Niece McCullough on all social media platforms at Bernie's daughter and on Facebook at Je'Niece McCullough. This has been a great episode. I am ecstatic about this episode. Thank you, Je'Niece, once again for agreeing to be interviewed for Conversations with Justin. I appreciate your honesty, just, with speaking on all the different topics we covered. I greatly appreciate it.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. I always appreciate any opportunity. Like I keep telling people, it's that people still love my dad and still want to talk about him all these years later. I can't tell you all how much that means, because for me, I know how much he means to me because he's dad. But that you all are still like, no, like he's our Uncle Bernie too, and I love him. And I, like you said earlier, I grew up watching him. That still stays with you so much that you all are still interested in talking about him. I don't even know. Thank you doesn't even cover it, because he could have died and people could have just said, okay, well, that's it, move on. But you all are still like, no, we still love him and we're still, holding on to his memory. So thank you.
Yes. And everyone, please make sure to, like I said, follow Je'Niece on social media platforms. Also follow us, LAWKI Media, on Instagram at LAWKI MEDIA, LAWKI Media. And be on the lookout for the next episode of Conversations with Justin at the next appointed time. This is Conversations with Justin. We love you. We thank you. And we'll see you on the flip side.